What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my video. We're going to be continuing our series looking at each division in the NFL in preparation for the 2024 fantasy football season. Today, we're going to do the NFC East. We're going to go through each team, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense, and kicker in preparation for the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm going to make a lot of videos over the next few weeks in preparation for fantasy football. So please check it out if you're interested, and like, comment, and subscribe to my channel if you're interested in fantasy football as well as other content. So we're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas is an interesting team. They're bringing back some guys that have been on the team before. Got a lot of holes that need to be filled, so we'll see what they decide to do from there. So Dak Prescott, quarterback on this team, he is getting drafted in a range that I think is pretty good value for where you're getting him. Getting him generally around the 7th to 8th round. I think that's solid value. Dak does not present the upside of some of these other quarterbacks. And he started very poorly last season, but he really had a very effective fantasy football season as it went along. And there's a lot of contract questions with him, so that could be extra motivation for him to put up a good season. He's definitely got his doubters, and there's a lot of risk with taking Prescott in that he doesn't really give you a lot of. If he's having a bad game, he doesn't really give you that floor of running that you would like to see from other quarterbacks. But Dak Prescott is going in a range that I think that he's not a bad pick if you take him at his ADP. So, yep. But my concern with him is just that the team, I think, as a whole, is not as strong last season offensively. It's very focused on CeeDee Lamb, who I'm going to be talking about a little more depth on that later. Running back. Their running back is Zeke Elliott. I'm not really sure why they decided to bring him back. I kind of thought that Zeke was going to be more, at this point, headed towards retirement or third-string running back. But he's back in the depth chart as the RB1. So I'm very skeptical about that personally. I don't really see how that is going to work out for them. But that when one doesn't live up to expectations, it opens the door for others. And there's a very interesting option here. Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn. These are guys that are going very late in drafts. And given Zeke Elliott's age and regression that comes with that, you can pick up Dowdle at a value that will be excellent. He's going in some of the last rounds in fantasy football drafts. And, this is somebody that you're just picking up to stash on your bench, but he could very well turn into the starting running back. He actually was more productive at times than Tony Pollard was last season. He just didn't get the opportunity. So Zeke Elliott, one, he's getting older, and two, he's slowed down. I think this is just the perfect opportunity for Dowdle to step in. And Deuce Vaughn is equally explosive. He's just not a very big guy, so I don't think that he's going to be taking on the load necessary to be an every down back. But this is a great opportunity for one of these guys to step up, and I think that they are going at a rate that is very good value for you to pick up at that point in the draft. CeeDee Lamb is one of the most interesting wide receivers to me in fantasy football. He's generally going as a top 5 pick. I personally have CeeDee Lamb right now as my number 4 overall player and my number 3 wide receiver. I have him just behind Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. So CeeDee Lamb to me is going to be excellent value. He's going to have a lot of opportunity in his offense. He's going to be hyper targeted. This is just setting up for him to be successful. I just don't have him as high as those other two because I think those other two are hyper targeted as well. I just have more confidence in their offensive systems to find a way to put them in a position to be successful than I do necessarily with Dallas. But we're kind of splitting hairs there. But CeeDee Lamb is among the best options that you can have at wide receiver in fantasy football, and I would pick him up over the next running back if you didn't get CMC. After that, there's a lot of question marks though. Brandon Cooks is the number 2, which is very concerning to me. Brandon Cooks is also kind of past his prime, much like Zeke Elliott. I just really do not see this being a consistent option that you could rely upon in fantasy. The rest of the options that they have after that are really like not that great either. They have Jalen Tolbert, who's been on the team for a bit. Um, he's got the familiarity. You've got Jalen Brooks, the second-year player. Maybe you get that sophomore breakout. Cavante Turpin, been on the team, shows some explosiveness, kind of not very, doesn't get a lot of volume, and Ryan Flournoy, who's a set 6th-round pick. So it's not like they've invested one of their picks in the high ranges of the draft on trying to add more weapons. So somebody is going to step up as the wide receiver too. Right now, sitting here in July, I can't tell you who that is going to be. This is something to monitor, though, because somebody is going to have to fill this void, and there's a lot of candidates. But I still feel like this offense is going to be very much CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson as the ones that are going to be getting most of the targets. And then that leads us to Jake Ferguson, which is why I really like Jake Ferguson and his value among the tight ends that are going in that range, is because Ferguson is essentially, right now, he's the second wide receiver on this team in terms of the targets that they're going to be distributing on this team, because most familiarity, best receiver. There's just he had a pretty good season last season. I just think that this is getting set up for him to be very successful, and a guy that's going in the 8th, 9th round, he's generally not even among the top 10 tight ends being taken. This is a steal if you can get Jake Ferguson in those later rounds. I would rather have Jake Ferguson, to be honest, than Travis Kelce, who I talked about in my last video. So somebody's going to fill a void on this team for that second and third wide receiver, and that whoever that is going to be a steal. So really keep an eye on this team and how this offense looks throughout the preseason and early parts of week 1. Defense, you got to really like this defense. They're always going to be a threat for turnovers. They're always going to be a threat for sack. Probably going to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. But with that being said, they're probably going to go at a price higher than I'm comfortable taking. I don't take a defense until it's the second to last round. And maybe if there's an excellent value, I would reach higher than that. Dallas is one of those defenses that if you can get them a little bit early, like maybe in the 4th to last round, I would consider taking that flyer. But I'm generally among the belief that you go with a streaming defense until you find one that sticks, because that's generally how defenses go, is that you find one that people don't really expect becomes great value for you that you didn't waste any draft capital on. Brandon Aubrey, again, one of those kickers that actually may be worth it to take higher than the last round. I think Aubrey is probably the only one. And I am very anti-drafting kickers higher than the last round, but Aubrey was very successful last season. And especially that this team doesn't really have clarity at the running back position, sets up perfectly for him to be kicking a lot of field goals because they can't finish drives, etc. So Aubrey, I think, is the only kicker in the NFL that you can make an exception to drafting him a little bit earlier than you would typically feel comfortable taking a kicker. All right, next we have the New York Giants, and another team where there's a lot of question marks. So Daniel Jones coming in off his ACL surgery. What is that going to look like? Is he still going to be as mobile? Because Daniel Jones has always, throughout his career, been sneaky fantasy value because he's a very good athlete and gives you a lot of value running the ball. But, they lost Saquon. He's recovering from surgery. Is he still going to be as explosive? We don't know. And because of that, he's not getting drafted. I would be interested in taking a flyer on him in 2 QB leagues. But in 1 QB leagues, I'm not really looking at him at all until he shows me that he's back to the way that he's been when he was extremely productive fantasy-wise. Shout out to Tommy Cutlets, still on this team. I'm sure everybody wants to see him back. I'd like to be honest. Running back, Devin Singletary coming in. There's a huge void that needs to be filled with Saquon. This guy, he would get all the reps on this team. I'm going to talk about him. And then shortly with the Philadelphia Eagles. Just what what a terrible loss for the Giants to let him go to their own divisional rival. Devin Singletary comes in with a great opportunity. He had some decent moments with Houston last season, but I just don't think that he gives you the ceiling that I really feel comfortable with. You're getting him at a great ADP as well. So I think that this is a great running back to take a flyer on. But if you want to go even deeper, if you want to go even dirtier, Tyrone Tracy, a rookie coming into this team, is going to have an opportunity to potentially overtake Devin Singletary. He's a 5th-round pick. He's not getting drafted generally for that reason, but maybe in the deepest of leagues. But this is definitely a lottery ticket flyer that I would really be looking at, because this team needs to fill a void left by Saquon. And Devin Singletary, a vet, maybe he really doesn't give you the upside of a team that's probably not going to make the playoffs. They might want to be seeing what they have in their rookie. So Tyrone Tracy, definitely target him among those late round picks, especially in deep leagues. I would be all over him. Wide receivers. Malik Neighbors, another position that needs to have a void filled. This team has just been such a fantasy black hole aside from Saquon for so many years. But Malik Neighbors coming in as top 10 pick, this is setting up perfectly for him to take over as the number 1 receiver on this team. I'm a little skeptical of rookie wide receivers. I think everybody takes them pretty high because of what happened with Jamar Chase in his rookie season. But Malik Neighbors has the potential to just step right away into a situation like that. Obviously, there's question marks with the quarterback play, but who else is he going to throw to among this receiving core? I mean, you have Darius Slayton, who is probably the best of these options available, but he's been pretty much mid throughout his career. You have Wan'Dale Robinson, who can't stay healthy. You have Jalen Hyatt, who is also kind of just always been a hypothetical, never really lived up to it. Isaiah McKenzie, kind of the same build of a slot receiver that just doesn't really move the needle for me. And then Allen Robinson, who is miraculously still in the league considering how poor his performances have been throughout the last couple seasons. So there's literally almost no other options on this team. So Malik Neighbors to me is in a perfect position to take him. He's got to go at a higher capital than some of the other rookie receivers I've talked about that I liked, like Adonai Mitchell, like Brian Thomas, guys like that. But Malik Neighbors, I think, is going to be valued worth that because this guy is going to get a lot of opportunity on this team. Tight ends this is probably the roughest tight end room in the league. Like, yikes. That's all I have to say. Defense, I think the true fantasy player on this team might be its defense. They have some very talented players. They've got some pretty difficult opponents though, so I'm a little concerned about how reliable they'll be week to week. But this is a good defense that is probably not going to get considered in fantasy football drafts. That you can probably get in the last round or even get on waivers, and this can be some great value for you. Like Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. These are all great pass rushers, generate a lot of sacks. They could generate some turnovers too. It really can be some sneaky value for you. Graham Gano is the kicker. Not really interested there. Philadelphia. A lot of fantasy relevant players on this team. This is going to be the most productive fantasy team, I believe, in this division, and probably the NFC. So Jalen Hurts, my number 1 QB on my board because he gives you the rushing value. He's getting a lot of touchdowns. They love to run that brotherly shove. That you get 6 points out of him consistently. Got injured last season and didn't really play as well as the season ended. So a lot of people's opinion on him are down. And because of that, his ADP fell. Because throughout the season, he was performing as a guy that you could have arguably taken at the first round among quarterbacks, which you generally don't want to do. But you get Jalen Hurts now at the range of the 3-4 turn. Not the 3-2 turn, but the 3-4 turn. That's excellent value for somebody that gives you a rushing floor consistently, has got tons of weapons. I know people are concerned now with Saquon Barkley, like what is how many 1-yard rushing touchdowns he's going to get now, but I'm personally not worried about that at all because he is going to be a successful fantasy football player. And among quarterbacks that you have to choose from, arguably to me, it's only Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson that are up there with him. And I like Jalen Hurts the most, given the consistency that you get from week to week. Week 11 prior, excellent. Dealt with an injury afterwards, didn't really look as great. But honestly, that just makes it perfect for you to swoop him at an extreme steal this season. Saquon Barkley coming in at running back. Again, I really like Saquon Barkley. This is a very productive fantasy football player who throughout the majority of his career in New York has been really the only option, and he finds ways to stay fantasy relevant and still be among the top performers at the running back position despite all the attention that he gets. Now he's going to have Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, so that just sets up perfectly for me for him to be in a position to be extremely successful. And honestly, like in terms of offenses, just in terms of how stacked they are at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, it's hard to find a team that's more stacked than the Eagles right now in terms of fantasy relevant players. If you get Saquon, I would be all over taking Saquon in the second round if you have the opportunity to. I just don't know if he's going to fall that far. Kenneth Gainwell is an interesting flyer to take. Will Shipley, successful running back at Clemson. I'm not super high on him, but these are guys to consider as handcuffs if you do have Saquon. Wide receivers, A.J. Brown. So I'm generally not very high on A.J. Brown compared to some of the other receivers, but I think that the reason that I'm really high on him this year is just because of the stack potential that you can get with Jalen Hurts. Like, as I said a few videos ago, like C.J. Stroud is being taken ahead of Jalen Hurts now, which I think is a big mistake. So one of the big moves that I'm going to be targeting, and I'm going to be showing you this in mock drafts too, is taking A.J. Brown, in that mid to late first round, and then trying to get Jalen Hurts on the third round. And honestly, I think you can even make a case for if you have a mid first round pick, take A.J. Brown and then stack Jalen Hurts in the second round too. I think that's solid value for you. So that's an incredibly explosive tandem that I think is going to really reap a lot of value for you because their chemistry is among the best in the league. And somehow A.J. Brown is still pretty underrated given that. Devontae Smith, solid receiver, doesn't really necessarily get the volume that you like at his ADP that he goes, but I think that this is still a really good option. I think if anybody's going to lose some touches because of the Saquon addition would probably be Smith, but I think that Smith at his ADP, maybe in like the 4th to 6th round, I think that's still pretty good. Very explosive and is going to continue to have a lot of options. They don't really have a ton at receiver outside of that. Paris Campbell is coming over, been mediocre at best fantasy football. They're giving John Ross another opportunity, interestingly enough. And then after that, a lot of receivers that they're kind of bringing in just to see how they do in training camp, and somebody's going to win out the battle. Dallas Goedert, among the tight ends that go in the range of Dallas Goedert, I'm generally not high on Goddard as one of the tight ends that I'd be targeting. Pretty inconsistent in recent years, and he has some good games from time to time, but I think that the majority of this offensive focus is going to be on Brown, then Barkley, then Smith, and then a distant fourth is going to be Goddard. This is a very good defense as well. I think that they're probably, again, kind of like the Cowboys are going to get taken a little higher than I'd feel comfortable taking them, but I think there can be some very good value for you in fantasy. Next, we're going to get to my team, Washington Commanders. Man, this team has just been so brutal the last few seasons. I'm really hoping that Dan Quinn can turn it around, but it's just they've got such a long way to go, man. This is like probably one of the worst organizations in professional sports, but I have hope. We'll see what happens this season, and that's because of Jaden Daniels. And actually, Jaden Daniels I do really like in fantasy football as well. He's expected to be a very good running quarterback. He's going to be, put in a situation to be successful with Cliff Kingsbury as his OC. So, I mean, the combination there, it gives you a lot of potential for a guy that's going in late rounds in fantasy football drafts. And among that second QB and two QB leagues is a very interesting option for me. And he's experienced. So, Jaden Daniels, I think, can be a solid fantasy quarterback for you. They've got a lot of holes on this team that they need to fill, and there's going to be some rough moments from time to time, but I think he has the potential to really be electric right out the gate. Running backs. So I really liked Austin Eckler in Los Angeles, and he had a rough season last season, but before that was being drafted in the first round. And I talked about it in my mock draft, or my looking back at the mock drafts from the previous season and how it actually looked into the next season. Eckler was drafted really high, but I mentioned that there's an opportunity, and he was generally one of the biggest busts in the first round last year. But now that he's going in the 8th round, this is a guy that if he can get himself healthy, and he's just 1 year removed from being a first round pick. So excellent value that you'd be getting here with Eckler. And again, being paired with Cliff Kingsbury, he's going to find ways to make him successful on this team. This is a huge steal at running back. All the running backs in this NFC East, I really like a lot. There's a lot of great options that you can get here from this division. Brian Robinson, he was very good last season. I think he's a very sneaky, underrated value. I just don't know if he's going to get the volume that he did last season to really justify taking him. He's going around the same range as Eckler, but I personally prefer Eckler because there's a little more explosive upside there. Wide receiver. So Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson are the big ones. McLaurin is, great receiver. I don't think that he's really giving you the fantasy ceiling that you would like necessarily as ADP. Dotson, though, is very good value for you to get in those late rounds. I think Jahan Dotson is somebody that I'm definitely targeting in fantasy. And I would really, if you can find a way to get that Jaden Daniels, Jahan Dotson stack in deep leagues, I think that would be a really good play for you as well. Luke McCaffrey, we'll see if he's as good as Christian, but I'm kind of not really interested in him at the time being for fantasy. These other receivers, Brown, Zacchaeus, Crowder, are not really moving the needle for me either. I'm still struggling to... Jaden Crowder, man, he's really found ways to stay in this league. It's kind of incredible. Defense, no, I don't think you want to take a chance on this defense. I hope they can turn around, but they've got a lot of work to do. And then their kicker, Ramiz Ahmed, that's not really interested in him. One thing that I did not mention, I skipped over the tight end. So Ben Sinnott is getting drafted in the in sleeper, and I just don't think that's worth it because Zach Ertz, I know he's old, but he's a very good football player. He's going to get some volume, and I think that Sinnott is not really in a situation where he's going to be successful. It's very rare to see tight ends. I know we had Sam Laporta last season, but it's very rare to have tight ends as rookies just become dominant immediately. So I think that I would not be trying to look into Ben Sinnott as my tight end for fantasy football. I wouldn't look at Ertz either, but I'm just saying that I'm seeing Sinnott go in these sleeper drafts, and I don't really agree with that. All right, well, that's all I've got for this video. Hope you guys have a good night, and next week we will continue with the NFC North. Talk to you guys next time.